The Deathworlders, a story by user Hambone. Chapter 16, Firebird, Part 2. Date point, 4 years, 3 months, and 1 week after Vancouver. Independent Trade Station 104, Auspice of Prosperity.
The whole station?
Oh yes, all because they allowed a few humans to live there.
The whispering pair spared a shifty glance in Miranda's direction, clearly thinking they were out of earshot and were being covert. Maybe they would have been with any other species. She tucked into a nutrient sphere, one of the 4 on her plate. The non-flavor and non-texture of the universal foodstuff was at least better than the bad taste being left in her mouth by the overheard conversation. She ignored it, slipping into her inhale, pause, exhale, pause meditation, until one phrase slipped past her attention.
Should throw her out the airlock.
Murder me? Really? She wouldn't have chosen to speak. If the decision had been conscious, she would have kept silent. But her weary outrage outpaced her discipline, and the words sang on the air, loud enough to bring conversation in the entire dining hall to instant silence. The one who had said it, a Koombura female, both shrank and bristled. Damage done. In for an inch, in for a mile. She stood, carrying her chair with her, set it up at the 2 conspirators' table, reversed, and straddled. Care to tell me how killing a fellow Sophont to save your own hide is any better than what the hunters are doing? The other conspirator, this one a relatively slim locale, cleared his throat, a gesture held in common with humans.
My friend Grinwert here has lost family to the hunters, he rumbled,
expression conciliatory.
The subject makes her...
Don't apologize on my behalf, Golron,
the Koombura snapped.
I can tidy my own burrow. Thank you.
As you say. If you'll excuse me while I fetch a second helping, then.
The locale stood, then addressed Miranda.
Would you like a measure of water? I understand your species need a lot of it.
That's very thoughtful, Miranda thanked him. Yes, please. Gwynwert watched him go, then sneered at her.
Expecting an apology, human.
How would you feel if total strangers were talking about spacing you just for being a Koombura?
Koombura don't endanger everybody on the station just by being here. I've got to be somewhere. Out the airlock is somewhere.
Miranda was pleased to see that, despite her Koombura antagonist's bravado, a cool stare still made her very uncomfortable. I don't even know why I bothered, she snapped, standing. Being scattered as she strode out of the room, instinctively recoiling from the sight of an angry Deathworlder. She was impressed when the locale, Golron, caught up with her down the corridor. His longer legs at least gave him the burst of speed to catch up with her angry stride, though it left him thoroughly out of breath. What do you want? She snapped.
My friend is...
he began, wheezing. A hell bitch?
That didn't translate.
She relaxed. He had clearly gone to a lot of trouble to catch up. The least she could do was hear him out. I wasn't being kind about her.
I guessed as much.
Whew. He straightened up, still breathing heavily, but clearly more in control again now. What do you want, Golron?
She thought you were staying here for some selfish reason when there's an alternative available.
What alternative?
I thought so. You don't know, do you?
No what?
I was wondering why you would stay here when people like Gwynwert must make life so hard, and when the Great Hunt is out there scouring for humans and devouring innocents on places like the Exo Station. But then it occurred to me that maybe you haven't heard.
Heard what, Golron? Miranda practically burst.
Your people have a colony now, a place where you could settle among your own kind, or maybe even go home. No more prejudice, no more...
He looked back down the corridor. No more hypocrisy? If I'd lost my family to the hunters, I would never suggest throwing somebody else to them. He sighed.
I really am sorry.
Don't be. You didn't say it. They stood in silence for a moment as she thought. Did you hear this colony's name?
Folktha, on the planet Cimbrian. They just announced it a few days ago.
I bet the Dominion didn't like that.
The planet in question is on the far side of the Kelsey front line, and the Alliance have vocally supported your species' right to self-determination, Golron told her. I'm sure the Dominion is very unhappy indeed. She laughed, although it was spoiled just a little as Golron recoiled from the flash of teeth. Nobody seemed to understand smiling, and it would be nice.
Thank you, Golron. I think I might just go there.
It's probably the best thing for everyone, he agreed. I'm sorry we weren't clear with you earlier. We just gossiped, rather than actually talking with you.
Well, you came through in the end. You and I are fine. Gwynward can still go fuck herself, though.
That seems
anatomically impossible, I know. She finished the all-too-familiar objection wearily. She definitely needed to be back among her own kind. Fortunately, she had just enough saved up. It would be a one-way trip, but the important part was she could afford it. Date point: 4 years, 4 months, 3 weeks after Vancouver. Series base: Saul. Drew Cavendish.
No. Drew elbowed his way between the new miners and singled out the culprit. You do not just check your own seal and trust it. You check your friends and get him to check yours. And then you both get a third opinion. He leaned in and tapped the newcomer's faceplate to punctuate his next sentence, pleased to see that they had gone pale inside their hard suit. The alternative is that you die. Come on. This is the most basic stuff. You already went over this down on Earth. Sorry, boss, the offender mumbled. Don't give me sorry, he growled, grabbing the helmet and yanking. It popped right off. If you had tried to go out there, we'd have had to blow the emergency repressure on the airlock, and that cost 7,000 pounds and a couple of burst eardrums. Get your seal checked. Yes, boss. Right, get that helmet back on. He watched as the newbie did so, and as his team members checked and double-checked the seal, to everyone's apparent satisfaction. Right, time to head out there. Now remember, outside the modules, the surface gravity is only 0.27 m/s. That's 0.029 Gs. So until we're clear of any overhead structures, we're going to shuffle, keeping our feet on the floor. Walking normally will bounce you into the air like a bloody ball. If you jump, you aren't coming back down again for minutes. Your safer pack is for emergencies only. Is everyone clear? There was a general muttering of, yes, boss. He didn't bother to ask them to sound off. This wasn't the military. But he made eye contact with every single one to make sure they weren't just agreeing by right. Fine. Let's go. There was, he knew, a lot of work still to do. It took time for people to intuitively recognize the difference between weight and mass. It took even longer for them to finally understand that working in a vacuum and under microgravity was actually harder work than down on Earth. Only 2, and these 2 he knew were going to turn out to be excellent members of the team, had started their hardsuit careers by spending time wearing the suit and customizing it with tape and padding, and a little swatch of Velcro inside the helmet, and a stylus or piece of wire on one of their fingers. The others would be pinched and blistered by the time they came back indoors in a few hours' time, distracted and maddened by the inevitable itches and frustrated by the thick gloves' inability to handle delicate work. He caught a glimpse of the artwork that one of the 2 customizers had done on the side of his helmet. It was actually a sticky decal, a classic trashy pinup of a rock chick with tattoos holding up a prominent full house. The scroll work underneath read Aces and Kings. Trashy and cliched though the decal was, it was a sensible idea for immediate identification, and Drew decided he would get one of his own as soon as possible. The airlock cycled, and the newbies took their first steps into vacuum. In his heart of hearts, Drew couldn't have been happier. Date point: 4 years, 4 months, 3 weeks after Vancouver. Phoenix, Arizona, USA, Earth. Gabriel Aries. Adam and Ava had school. Neither felt up to it, but Gabriel had put his foot down. They still needed an education, and they needed a return to something resembling normalcy for the sake of their mental health. Phoenix had heard the death of San Diego.
The shockwave had faded to the point of only cracking a few windows and setting off some car alarms by the time it washed over central Arizona. But it had still been loud. Nobody in the city had failed to notice it, even with Phoenix's deaf residents feeling the noise deep inside their chests. It was tough for Gabriel, too. He didn't know anybody in this city. Pretty much all of his friends and living relatives had lived in San Diego, aside from a few distant cousins in Guadalajara and the handful of SDPD officers who had, like him, been out of town on the day their city was killed. There was nobody left. Phoenix, he suspected, was just temporary, but he had no idea where would come next. And after moving all their stuff in and getting the kids off to school, he was finding himself sitting around watching movies and resisting the urge to drink. That way, he knew, led self-destruction. He was lost in a black mood when his phone rang, the default woodenish staccato notes taking a few seconds to percolate through Bruce Willis's fleeing the cops in a flying taxi. Hello? Hello there. Is this Detective Gabriel Aries? The voice had a British accent. Si, retired. Sir, my name is Sean Howard. I work for the Cimbrian Colonial Administration. Your name was forwarded to me by a Mr. Jenkins at the Scotch Creek Research Facility. Jenkins? Yes, I know him. What's he doing forwarding my name to you? With the colony having gone public and opened its doors to potential settlers, we're beginning to establish our civilian law enforcement. You came highly recommended. Me? Gabriel shifted uncomfortably as his abused spine twinged at him. Why? I'm not exactly fighting fit anymore. We still need a chief of police, somebody to handle policy, set up our police service, and take an investigative role if, God forbid, we need it. You won't be expected to go chasing anywhere. So it's a desk job then? A highly paid and senior one in the colonial administration, complete with accommodation for you and any dependents. I've got 2 teenagers under my care. We have a school, sir. We're trying to attract families. We take education seriously. And why would I want to leave Earth? That's for you to decide, sir. But we intend to build a good life out of here. A fresh start, the model for humanity's future. I can't tell you whether or not you're interested in being involved in that. Gabriel thought about it. After a few moments of silence, Howard spoke. It's a big decision. You're under no pressure, Detective. But with your qualifications and background, we'd love to have you. I'll let you think about it. Thank you. Howard hung up. Gabriel was still thinking about it when the kids got home. Date point: 4 years, 6 months after Vancouver. Folktha, Cimbrian. Ava Rios. Nah, take... Cogeme! Adam's hands jerked up in alarm as the world around them blinked. One instant, it was the dull concrete and steel interior of a hangar somewhere in Canada, and the next, well, a palace. Or at least the glass and steel structure on the lawn of a palace that housed Folktha's end of the jump array. The architecture was a lot strange, but elegant. All curves and loops and domes, looking more like something that had been gently coaxed out of the landscape rather than built atop it. She giggled at his alarm, and it surprised even her. Ever since her parents had died in the San Diego blast, mirth had been hard to find. But it sprang back suddenly, watching her boyfriend jump out of his skin at the sudden change. Language, she teased. He blushed, noticing that others in the colonist group were grinning at him, although most were also clearly recovering from their own surprise. She smiled at his back as he scowled and hoisted the bags that contained all his and Gabriel's worldly possessions. Gabriel protested that he could carry his own load, but Adam knew better. The older Ares, a handsome and gray-haired mirror image of his son, was too stubborn to admit that his injury still impeded him. Long hours in the gym had gone a long way toward restoring his fitness, but the bullet had done permanent harm that would never quite go away. Ava wheeled her own bag behind her, taking in the sights as they emerged through a short tunnel, passing through a gossamer orange curtain of light that tingled her skin and made her teeth feel strange. The air beyond was cool, cold even. Not the biting chill she'd felt during their few days at Scotch Creek that invaded her clothing and pinched at her skin, but the cold of a crisp spring morning, though it looked like full daytime. The air tasted sweet, Almost. There was only a tang of wood smoke on it, which if anything only enhanced the certainty that this was a place that humanity had yet to leave any kind of permanent footprint on. The sun was strange, too. It was more orange, slightly. A little larger. It made the place look warm, even while the air felt chilly. There was a smattering of cheers and applause from a small crowd that had gathered to greet the new arrivals. A silver-haired man in a suit was shaking hands and offering warm welcomes. They'd been prepared for the cold, of course. Cimbrian's immigration policy included funding to buy some rugged clothes suitable for the colony. Out of their own pockets, she and Adam had paid for some customization, with the result that their jackets bore matching patches on the sleeve, skyscrapers and a phoenix, and the legend, De las Cenizas. Avoiding the governor, who was warmly shaking Gabriel's hand and welcoming him to Folktha, she looked around. To her relief, she immediately spotted that a second group had formed off on the sidelines. Folktha's junior citizens, some of whom waved at her when they saw her notice them. She tapped Adam on the arm to get his attention, pointed them out, and together they broke away from the group to meet their new peers. It was quite the mix. Most were obviously English. There was just something about how they stood, did their hair, what they wore, that screamed it, even before they spoke, and quite the age range, too. She and Adam were probably toward the older end of the spectrum. The youngest was clearly only about 9 years old. There wasn't a lot of makeup being worn, she noticed, becoming suddenly and absurdly conscious of her own, subtle though it was. In the last couple of years, makeup had started to become more of a male thing in schools, too. The boys had turned out to be just as vain as the girls once the makeup companies had broken a generations-old prejudice and started marketing foundation at the adolescent male market. It had been met with ridicule and even outrage among some parents, but had caught on. It was slightly strange to realize that now the only other person wearing any makeup at all in this little group was her boyfriend. There were introductions, some stereotypically British apologies about being terrible at names, and apologizing in advance for getting them wrong. Really, it was just like going to a new school, though as far as she could tell, it was refreshingly free of drama. "So, what are you guys going to be doing?" she asked. "It's all apprenticeships right now," one of the girls, Gwen, told her. "But the colony's not really settled yet. It's only a couple of months old. I was thinking I'd go for nursing, maybe doctor, but it depends on what we need." "Botany," Kieran said firmly. "I'm already doing it. I'm the colony's only journalist." That part had been obvious. Sarah, at the absolute most only 14 years old, was wearing a big DSLR camera and a tablet computer in a satchel on her hip, and had been taking notes and pictures throughout. "What about you?" she asked of Adam. She had that popped-hip, interested look that Ava knew well, so she nestled up to him and took his arm, just to make sure both of them were clearly off-limits. Some of the guys had been looking at her with interest, too. If he noticed the attention, Adam gave no sign of it. "Law enforcement," he said. "It's what I was planning on doing back on Earth." "Oh, wait. Your dad's our new police chief, isn't he?" "That's right." "What about you, Ava?" "Like, Gwen said, I guess it depends on what we need. I mean, the plans I had don't really... like, who needs a theatrical makeup artist here?"
"Go for it anyway," Big Jack shrugged. "Can you do hair?"
Yeah, a bit."
"There you go, then."
"I don't know. I never saw myself as a stylist," Ava protested. "I like the girly stuff, but not, enough to do it for a living." "Well, if nothing else, it's something to do until you find somebody to apprentice under. And you could earn some money," Sarah said. She spoke in a hummingbird blur, so fast that it was sometimes hard to tell where one word ended and the next began, and was constantly being told to slow down by the others. "I mean, I know my mum would love to get her hair done and her nails, and some of the men have really beards now, so maybe you could learn to shave, too. You could make a lot of money just helping people stay—"
"Hey, no pressure," Adam interrupted her, hugging Ava around her waist. "We don't need to rush in. We don't even know where we're sleeping yet."
"Oh, your house is all built and ready."
That was little Jack, the youngest kid in the group, who'd so far remained silent and let the bigger kids gossip. He turned to Sarah, whose identical brown hair suggested they were siblings.
"Can I show them, please?"
Sarah laughed indulgently.
"Okay,"
she mock-relented.
"I'll come with you. See you tonight, guys."
They walked away, little Jack running forward and then occasionally stopping to grouse about how slow they were being.
Were you told where you're staying? She asked.
We were told there'd be a house. Dad was pretty spare on the details, Adam admitted.
Not just any house. You two are getting your own, Sarah said. You're so lucky. I have to stay with Mum and Dad and Jack. Our own place? Like just us? I figured we'd be staying with Gabriel.
Ava glanced back down the road to where Ares Sr. was still meet and greeting with, presumably the colony's most important people. He'd sunk gratefully onto a camp stool while he talked.
Oh, he's up on Palace Rise, Sarah said, pointing toward the half-rebuilt palace. All the admin people live up there. You're down here on Delaney Row near the school. Delaney Row? Ava asked.
You've got street names already? Adam followed up.
Yeah, Sarah said. Jen Delaney was the first governor here. She handed it over to Sir Jeremy and left. I heard the soldiers talking about her. They all think she's really badass and they say she can shoot a gun really accurately. And she told them all off one time because they saw her naked and were staring, but she didn't care. So they voted to name one of the housing zones after her.
Voted where? Adam asked.
The thing.
Like council, senate?
No, the thing. It's an old word. I think Norse. You know, Vikings. It's like the whole town getting together to talk and vote. Sir Jerry says it's the best kind of democracy for right now because we're still so small.
Sarah clearly had an enthusiasm for sharing knowledge that was the hallmark of a born journalist, coupled to the motor mouth of a born irritant.
One of the sessions we voted on what to call everything, so we've got Palace Rise, Delaney Row, Crash Avenue, Camp Uplift. That's the army. You'll like them. They're really tidy. Cool. We've not got names down to streets yet because there's not really any streets, and oh, we're here.
Adam and Ava's house turned out to be tiny. In fact, it could have fit comfortably inside a large room. Inside, though, it turned out to be pure, efficient space. It had everything. The living room doubled as a kitchen, complete with cooker, dishwasher, and washer-dryer, though these both had signs on them warning that they weren't working yet. A folding-out dining table that recessed cleverly into the floor when not in use, and a fridge. The bed was up a short, extremely steep flight of stairs that doubled as storage, and below it were the bathroom, complete with a shower and bath, and even a spare room. The whole thing couldn't have been more than 20 feet long, and even included a porch.
They've still not got the town water set up yet, Sarah continued, but there's like a collector on the roof for rainwater that should keep you going until that happens. Dad says it's really clean because Cimbrian is a Class 4 world, so apparently you can drink right out of the stream if you want, but he said it's still not a great idea to do that just in case. So the collector purifies the rainwater, and you've got a little water heater. It's really cool. It only rains at night here. You get to listen to rain on the roof every night. It's amazing.
She paused for breath, then seemed to recall the principle of letting other people get a word in sideways.
What do you think?
Ava just looked at Adam, who was gazing around with one of only a few genuine smiles she had seen on him in months. I think wow, he said. Ava nodded, pleased that he was so pleased. Sarah just beamed, then seemed to remember something.
Oh yeah, I made you a welcome gift.
She produced an ovoid disc of sanded wood, though Ava guessed that the wood in question was nothing that might be found on Earth. Before applying a coat of varnish, somebody had carefully pyrographed a single word onto it.
Eden. It's a house name sign, you know? With your names, I thought... Do you like it?
I like it, Ava told her. Adam nodded beside her.
I helped,
Jack exclaimed.
No, you didn't. You watched, Sarah protested. I did all the work. Nuh-uh, Dad did all the work. You just wrote on it, and I helped because I fetched the sandpaper for him. It's wonderful, Ava assured them both. I'll hang it up after we're done unpacking. Oh, okay. I should get back up to the palace and take pictures and see who's arrived so I can put in the newsletter anyway.
Sarah beamed.
See you tonight. What's happening tonight? We're having a big cookout like we always do when new people come. Just follow your nose. You can't miss it.
Okay, we'll see you there, Adam promised. The little house became noticeably quieter the second the brother and sister were gone. Ava sank onto the couch with a big sigh, finding it extremely comfortable considering how small it was.
Wow, what does she run on? She grumbled.
Adam just chuckled, still poking around.
Our own place. I knew Dad was keeping a secret. I know. Hey!
Ava stood up, took his hand, turned him towards her, and kissed him.
I'm kinda scared, she admitted.
Of what?
Adam, come on. We're 16. I mean, come on, we're still kids. But everybody's treating us like we're not, even your dad. I don't know if I want to be treated like an adult yet.
I guess, he agreed. It's like our first date was what? Less than a year ago? 10 months?
Yeah, and that scares me because now, here we are, living together on our own, starting a new life, like we're.
She trailed off, not quite willing to say the word that hung on the end of that sentence. Like we're... Yeah, he agreed.
Yeah.
She rested her head against his chest, and it made his voice sound bassy and warm as he rubbed her hair and confessed. I'm scared too. It made her feel a lot better. Date point: 4 years, 6 months after Vancouver. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, Nevada Desert. Riley Jackson. It felt like a very personal kind of heresy, but the second she saw her new sled, Riley fell in love all over again. She heard her own enthusiasm without really registering that she was saying it. Oh my God! Look at this thing! It was definitely the child of the TS-101. The lines were very similar, but sleeker, finer, sharper somehow. The GAU-8S housing was smoother and flusher with the hull, the barrel itself seeming an organic part of the vehicle rather than the clunky load it had been on Pandora. The prominent tumorous S-Files blisters were now mere subtle swellings in the belly. The kinetic thrusters had been moved and sunk into the hull, finally getting rid of an obsolete concession to air intake. The cockpit was longer, lower, built for two. She was, like Pandora, after a makeover, with her war paint on. Meaner, leaner, and keener. Even in the hangar, even with a tarp still draped over her, she looked like the Empress of the Sky. Thought you'd like her, the chief engineer said, grinning. She could have kissed him then and there, but there was an important question to ask first. When do I get to fly her? Come on, you don't think we'd tease you like that, do you? He asked. She's ready now.
Oh!
Riley beamed.
I love you.
I bet you say that to all the guys who give you a multi-million-dollar aerospace vehicle. Riley giggled at that.
You got me. But okay, what's she called?
Officially, she's the Lockheed Martin EF/A336TS Mark II. But we're open to suggestions on a fancy name to go with that. Riley reached up and touched her new beloved's hull for the first time. It was warm to the touch, and after the events of only a few months ago, she could think of only one appropriate name.
Firebird.
Date point: 4 years, 6 months, 1 week after Vancouver. Series base: Seoul. Drew Cavendish. Criticized the president's handling of the aftermath of the San Diego blast as the USA officially slipped into recession this week, with the economy recording its second successive quarter of decline. The Dow Jones and the FTSE 100 index fell sharply in response to the news, fueling worldwide fears that the aftermath of San Diego's destruction will be a worldwide financial crisis, though China's SSE index closed trading up 3... Hey, I was bloody watching that, Drew M. complained. It was uncharacteristic of Cavendish to just march into the office and shut off the news feed. Then again, it was uncharacteristic of him to be unwashed and still wearing his hard suit's underlayer around the office. Yes. Well, we have a serious problem. Drew M. snapped immediately into business mode. His boots swung down from the desk and he blurred through a series of keyboard shortcuts, summoning the serious incident forms. What happened? Nothing exactly, but it was this close to being a dead miner. Cavendish dropped something on the desk. What's this? Hard suit heat regulation field emitter. It's an essential component of the life support system, supposed to keep you... I know what it does, mate. Aye, sorry. This one broken? Malfunctioning. It was drawing in heat constantly. If Aces wasn't super careful, he'd have gone up that airlock and slowly heated up until the hypothermia got him. Aces? Kessler. I call them all by their helmet decals these days. Bless him, he's a careful one who runs a full diagnostic before we head out every time. That's why he caught it. Anybody else? I'll write it up, Drew M. promised.
Yeah, well, don't put this next bit in the report, mate. Cavendish shut the door. Between you and me, I suspect foul play. Highly duly, Drew, you sure? If I was sure, I wouldn't be telling you to keep it dark. But we ran a full check on these things last night. It happened exactly when we were least likely to catch it, and exactly when it was least likely to happen, too. That'd be right. Yeah, well, as team lead, I'm making a decision here. Full check every day. That'll shave an hour off our work time every shift. That adds up, mate. You put the whole project behind schedule. Drew M. protested. His heart wasn't really into it, though. When it came down to it, they both knew that deadlines were less important than lives. As opposed to a man dying out there because of an equipment failure we could have caught that morning. Not on my watch, Drew. Nah, yeah. You go ahead and get that done. I'll fill in the report. But we'll keep the sabotage idea on the down low and keep an eye out for now, right? And hope I'm wrong, yes. Drew was in a thoughtful mood as he returned to the hard-suit maintenance workshop. His helmet was lying exactly where he'd left it, uncharacteristically untidy atop the workbench. He'd relented and agreed to a pin-up for his helmet decal after they had swept through the team, driven by Jenny O'Neill's decision to have a shirtless and otter-muscled samurai adorning hers. Cavendish's own was still relatively tasteful. The girl was seen from behind looking back over her shoulder, wearing a blaze-orange boiler suit and a welding mask to match the torch on her other shoulder. The only real concessions to titillation were the way the boiler suit clung to her figure just a little too well. A hint of side boob, and the obligatory pout. Strong colors and a shape that was easily identified at a distance were the order of the day. The pin-ups had become a critical part of recognizing one another in the strange lighting conditions of an asteroid's surface. While each of the pin-ups was certainly nice to look at up close, being able to glance at the side of a team member's head and see O'Neill's splash of purple hakama, or Kessler's strong black and white, was a godsend for immediate identification. Even the experimental RFID system wasn't so useful, except at longer distances. What's the verdict? He'd asked. He'd left the team to run diagnostics on their gear in response to Kessler's near miss. Chitsenga shook her head. Her helmet decal was of a dreadlocked guitar player. All clean, she reported. Good. Take 10. Then we're going to suit up and get back out there. May as well get a half day in. They all nodded and filed out to freshen up, grab a bite, take a toilet break or whatever else they did to prepare for hours out in the pit. And pretty soon, he was left alone with Kessler, who was still fastidiously calibrating the faulty emitter's replacement. Did you check the footage? Kessler asked him. Not yet. Kessler just grunted and jerked a thumb towards the workshop's only computer. Drew shrugged, passing off the gesture, brusque even by Kessler's terse standards, as the product of stress and a near miss with death, and opened the security camera footage. He wasn't remotely surprised when, 2 hours before the start of shift, 8 minutes of footage turned out to be corrupted. Date point: 4 years, 6 months after Vancouver. Office of the Director of the CIA, Washington, D.C., USA, Earth. He was as good as his word, actually. I think our chaps impressed upon him that if we were inclined to bring him back in for another little chat, there would be little he could do to stop us. Yeah, well, I met your man Powell. That man could scare the red off the devil. He's an asshat like that, yes. This is pretty grim news, Michael, the boss told his opposite number. If even one of those implants we imported is compromised that way. I was under the impression we reverse-engineered the lot, and that every single one in use anywhere on Earth or beyond was built and installed by our own people. Yeah, but from what the guys up at Scotch Creek told my people up there, the problem with that is that alien tech is still a ways ahead of our own, so we're not so much reverse engineering as copy-pasting in a lot of cases. I see. You don't have one, do you? Cancelled that appointment the second you sent me the dossier. You? Call me old-fashioned, but I was always rather squeamish about brain surgery. Way I hear it, it's more like getting your ears pierced. One solid thunk, bada bing, bada boom. You understand Swahili now. Is that supposed to be an encouraging thought? The boss grunted down the phone. Heck if I know, Michael.
We'd better chase this up over here. Give my best to your wife and kids, and mine to yours. Good luck.
Date point: 4 years, 6 months after Vancouver. Cimbrian system, the outer reaches. Miranda King. She had known that stasis would feel like no time had passed at all, and it had been the cheapest way to travel, in a ship that was little more than a warp engine in a stasis chamber, with a basic control console. Punch in the coordinates, hit the big button, arrive. When she hit the button, she was surrounded by the simple functional hangar of the Auspice of Prosperity's basic shipyard. A subjective eye blink later, Cimbrian was a blue-green-white trinket, perfect and beckoning so close in front of her. She was so struck by its beauty, by how much like Earth it looked, that she didn't notice the alarm at first. But she couldn't ignore the urgent text that filled the forward monitor, nor the understanding of its meaning that her translator frantically thrust into her brain. Alert! Gravity spike! She looked up as a ship, a sleek steel crescent blade with an ugly insectoid component to its design, thundered silently past her starboard beam, turning and decelerating. The depth of her stupidity hit her. If the galaxy as a whole knew about Cimbrian, then of course that meant so did the hunters. She had delivered herself to them on a plate. When the swarm ship of the Blood of Bloody Fangs took her on board, they had made every appropriate preparation that they could think of. The charge would be led by 5 gammas, each armed with fusion blades. They would blow the tiny craft's airlock off its mountings and storm inside. With speed and packwork, the hated Deathworlder would die too swiftly to strike back. They did not anticipate that Miranda would attack them first. The instant her craft landed, she blew the explosive bolts on the door and charged before they were even lined up and ready to begin the assault. Wielding part of her chair as a crude club, she killed 9 of them. Date point: 4 years, 6 months, and 1 week after Vancouver. Classified facility: Earth. 6. He didn't sit bolt upright in his bed. That would have drawn immediate attention from his unseen observers. Instead, he explored the almost forgotten tickle of a micro wormhole link. 7? Ah, finally. Those Deathworlders are cunning, finding a way to interfere with wormholes like that. But it seems our attempts to break through have finally paid off. After that city was destroyed, I had assumed you would abandon me. Far from it. You will be decompiled, of course, but your insight is a valuable resource. Come home. Yes. 6 spared a momentary pang of thought for Stephen and Carl. He wished he could leave a message behind for them. Explain that he was taking the gamble he knew they couldn't let him take. Explaining that this wasn't a betrayal. But of course, he could leave that message. All he had to do was neglect to do one little thing. He left the message, slipped through the wormhole, and was gone. Where ordinarily he would have left a brain-hemorrhaged corpse, he now left behind his former host. In the darkness, Hugh Johnson sat up and cried the tears of freedom.